reflect the reality?
Well, I think it's a matter of, and I appreciate what you say, Senator. As I said, we can move forward with the science and with what we know. In other words, empirical and the other type of evidence that we can gather. As far as doing that now, why haven't we gone and done it? Because we're looking at a very small number of pilots compared to the population of pilots in Australia. It comes down to resources. I cannot fund a study into colour vision deficiencies and moving forward. As for the age of increasing the age to 65, many countries in the world were involved in that. I was involved in that outside of Australia. And in fact, the interesting thing was, and just as an aside, one of the few countries that opposed it was an African country where they pointed out that with the age of 60 for a commercial pilot now, their average life expectancy was 58 anyway, so what was the point in putting it up to 65? So there's been a great deal of discussion around the world about age. I agree when it comes to treating depression, and Professor Navati may wish to add more, and that we have done very well. There certainly are people flying in Australia that I know would not fly in other jurisdictions. And I think it is a worthwhile project to review colour vision deficiencies and to review the data we have. I just can't fund it, and it's not a high priority to me.
Okay, last question then. Dr. Navate, given the statement you made in your submission to the latest AET inquiry, that you said CVD pilots pose a significant risk to the safety of air navigation in any role, and that risk can only be mitigated by imposing conditions that limit operations to those environmental conditions that limit the opportunity for errors, and that's a quote from your submission. Were a study to be done, as I've just discussed with the Director of Aviation Safety, that had a similar outcome that demonstrated on the same basis that we did the SSRI study, that there was no decrease in safety, would you support colour vision deficient pilots being able to exercise the privileges of the licence that they hold?
Before I answer that, Senator, I'd just like to make one point about the quote that you made from the O'Brien matter. I'm unsure as to whether I'm allowed to mention something which is in a tribunal, but what you've quoted is actually with reference to people who have not undergone testing for colour vision deficiency. In Australia, there are a large number of people who have failed the initial test, that's the Ishihara test, and have thereafter continued to fly and have not undergone any detailed testing which identifies what's the level of colour vision defect. If I can just mention colour vision, there used to be a time when people said people were colour blind. That's no longer the case. We have if I may be allowed, a spectrum of colour vision deficiencies ranging from one cone, abnormalities in two cones, and so on. And so if we know what is the size of the defect, then I have no difficulty about being able to make a specific decision in a specific case. The other point which you raised a little while ago about natural justice and the fairness of doing the CAT test. In Australia, the CAT test is not, in the occasions that it has been used, it has never been used as the endpoint, as it is used in other jurisdictions. In other jurisdictions, you fail the test, that's the end of the story. As you know, Senator, in this matter, this person in point has failed the CAT test and has been given a certificate because we are looking at the extent of failure as one of the many factors which you identified as being useful in making a certification decision. Talking about the depression test, the study which was done for depression, the study which was done for depression was supported by all the other work which had been done on depression. There's a large amount of work which has been done on depression which suggests that, and I don't want to go into detail about it, but the fact that a person who has been provided with treatment for a particular period of time, the risk of remission dropped off. So the main reason for allowing that to happen was that there was empirical independent evidence that it was safe. It was then implemented, and then we did a non-inferiority trial to show that it was no inferior and there were no greater accidents in that case. I'm very happy for us to do that sort of a study if we have the funding for it. But what will be required is that every colour vision defective pilot in Australia will have to be colour vision tested to know what is the actual deficiency. And some of them will then meet particular levels and some of them will not. And so, you know, if we go down that path, depression is a single condition because we talked about, well, you know, unipolar depression. Whereas with colour vision, we are dealing with about 8 or 9 different diagnoses under the umbrella of colour vision deficiency. So that's the difficulty in what you've raised, Senator.
I'll just finish with one last question then, just to repeat. If the study indicated that there, for the range of people who have been tested, that there was no detrimental safety outcome, would you support then people, even those who'd failed the 3 levels testing, including the CAD, if they could demonstrate competence to fly the aircraft under a range of conditions that CASA specified, to exercise the privileges of their licence?
We support that today in individual cases, Senator. We don't need, I mean, the study would be helpful, but today, when a decision is made on the basis of a test which has been done, we look at that test not in isolation, but in the context of all the other things.
I'm meaning to exercise the privileges of their licence. So, for example, the captain, ATPL, if they've demonstrated over thousands of hours an ability to fly single pilot, part of a crew, by night, in cloud, and that study was done, would you support that decision?
If we were able to do a study at that level of granularity, then it would certainly be strong evidence to support that, Senator.
Okay.
I think the presumption is, Senator, that we would be looking for, we would be taking the assumption that the person does meet the requirements. We'd be looking for the negative indicators, not saying to take something away. But as I said the other day as well, if there was such a study done, funded by the government or whoever, and with everything else that Professor Navati has added in there, then I can see myself, as following on from what I've just said, that I wouldn't issue it. I would issue it.
Okay. Thanks, Chair.